let's get into it. Let's have some fun, right? I mean, when we spoke what, like a month ago about prep for everything. And the way we wanted to structure this conversation was more of a question and answer from the audience. And
Come on, you start. Why don't you start?
You guys, actually, seriously, if somebody wants to ask the first question, no, I'm kidding. We'll do that in like a couple of minutes. We'll do it in a couple of minutes. So, Robby, this is the first time you and I are meeting in person. Crazy thing. This is a little sidebar story. Robby, CEO of Animoca, Yat is the chairman. They obviously have known each other for many, many years, but you guys did not see each other since what? Was it
2019?
2019. And you saw each other last in, when was it?
3 weeks. Well, actually, I saw him in 3 countries in the last 3 weeks, but up until 3 weeks ago.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. So, and that was the monumental growth of Animoca from, a game developer and an owner of game IP to the juggernaut in the crypto, Web3, NFT, and gaming world. I mean, it's a catch-all at this point, but $6 billion valuation, $100 million most recently from Temasek, some of the best investors in the world, SPV here from a group of fantastic game investors, Mike Vorhaus, an investor. You guys bought Gamma. Don't ask me what. No, I'm kidding. But
it's okay. You put the money back in. So.
Yes, exactly, exactly. How'd you get here today? Like, outside of being,
sure.
Not on a plane, but how did you get here,
sure.
figuratively? And I want to hear a little bit about it.
So I've always been in TMT. I've actually for technology or telecom, media, and technology, and I've actually done all 3. So I spent about 10 years in each bucket, basically. And I've been in gaming for 10 years now, working with Yat at Animoca Brands. We've been friends for 25 years, since Web 1.0. And about 5 years ago, we made the pivot to focus exclusively on the intersection of blockchain and games. Because like most companies in the mobile game space, growth slowed, right? As the industry matured, as handsets, once everybody in the world had a smartphone, then that vector of growth slowed down and user acquisition costs started to go nuts, and they are insane today. And so it only makes sense to build a game business on mobile if you have that user acquisition budget, and typically if you have mid or hardcore content. So the casual market only works for a few very, very large publishers, in our opinion. So in the search for growth, we discovered a hackathon project through some friends of ours in Vancouver.
What year was this?
This was 2017. Summer of 2017, during the famous ICO summer. And we had...
Which was a fun summer, come on.
A
lot of parties, on boats,
it was.
in random places.
There's still a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And so we had heard about blockchain. Some of us had experimented with it personally. And there was a lot of noise over the course of that summer because many people raised a lot of money. And through some friends, we discovered a hackathon project in Vancouver who was doing some cool stuff because they were trying to make a game using blockchain. And so we started working with them, and we said, hey, this is really cool. We'd love to publish this. So we became the publishers of this game in China, in Asia. And the game turned out to be CryptoKitties. And so that was...
remember CryptoKitties.
That was the company. The hackathon project was actually what became Dapper Labs. And so they spent that August inventing the NFT for the purpose of CryptoKitties. So we were, like all things in life, we were very lucky. We happened to meet the guys who invented the NFT at the time they invented it, right? I think the part maybe that we can take a little bit of credit for was within about 4 months, we decided that we would just pivot and focus the entire business, all new games, all new catalog, everything just on blockchain. We're like, okay, the ship has sailed for traditional games. We're moving forward.
Was that a tough decision to make or no?
No.
I'm not supposed to ask yes or no questions, supposedly, as a moderator, but sometimes I do a shit job.
It was, well, because also, like, from my perspective, when you think about onboarding people to a new technology, what you want is the least amount of friction as possible. And that's why I loved this idea of games, because if you tokenize in-game currency as a fungible token, you tokenize in-game content as NFTs that are playable, you basically don't need to teach the user to do anything new. I know, you have to set up MetaMask, and there's going to be all those people who gripe about that.
Can't figure out my, my phrase. I forget it all the time.
But did you ever try to connect a credit card to Android in 2012? I mean, it was impossible.
No.
Right? The industry goes through these. And that was Google was a big company by 2012, right? And so I think when you think about consumer onboarding, we don't have to actually teach any new behavior to 5 billion people in order to use our new product. And that really appealed to me. Because the flip side of it was, if you can give digital property rights in a game, so people go and spend money in games and they buy digital stuff and they do the same thing they've been doing for 15 years plus, but they own it, why would you ever do the one where you don't own anything? It just doesn't make, I mean, that's why it was such an easy decision.
And conceptually, I remember when I first met Yat, he was discussing this NFT revolution that was yet to happen. I think Animoca was valued at 98, 99, maybe 100 million USD.
I think it was Australian dollars.
Australian dollars, yes. And this is right when I was deciding to sell Gamma, and I said I wanted to find a great home for it, which Animoca was and still is. And he looked me in the eyes and said, we're going to control all the wallets in the world and all the NFTs in the world. Something like that. Not in the sense of we're going to control, but we're going to enable.
And all 500 of them were ours at that point.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And I'm sitting there eating sushi in the center in Hong Kong. The tech center? Cyberport. And I'm like, okay, I'm selling my company to this guy because he's either going to make this Animoca Brands a multi-billion-dollar thing, or I don't know, but I'd rather take that chance. And I remember leaving that conversation, I was shaking. It was one of those Silicon Valley moments where you speak and you say, oh my God, it's changing. Now the vision has become a reality in the sense of, NFTs are everywhere. Animoca is everywhere. From a competitive standpoint, when people call me, they go, I want an introduction to Animoca, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, no, number one. Number two, you really need to think about why you're approaching Animoca. So there's two investors in the world that every single games blockchain, or really every single Web3 NFT project that approach. We know one, Andreessen Horowitz, and the other is Animoca.
It's why we're the number 1 and 2 most active investors in the space.
It's incredible. And the question that I'm going to ask, and sorry, this is a long-winded version of that question, how does it feel to you personally as CEO, as an entrepreneur, as a founder who's been through ups and downs, has been trying to create the metaverse since, 1997 or whatever, since reading Snow Crash? How do you feel at 4 a.m. when you wake up thinking, oh my God, we built this incredible company and now we need to deliver? Has it changed? Does it feel like we've made it? Or, as an entrepreneur myself asking.
No, I think the only thing that I find really transformational is the access, honestly. The access is totally different. Like now,
people invite you.
What used to be 4 degrees of separation is now 1, basically, in the tech industry at least, which is really interesting. But day to day, I'm still terrified that every product is shit.
Okay.
I mean, seriously.
Okay, we can breathe now,
because
everybody.
that part of the business doesn't change. Games are really hard. It's a hit-driven business. Just because we're big doesn't make us any better at it. We just have more smart people now. That's all.
Got it. And as the organization has grown, I remember selling and sort of going through the process when it was a much smaller organization. How are you focusing from a management perspective to deliver that better experience and to make sure that the investments that you make, regardless of the stage, will yield results for Animoca shareholders and as well as the communities?
Sure. I think the key here is network effects. It's our fundamental belief in why Web3, right? So Web3 is all about network effects because it's built on this idea of essentially an open source movement where we can have interoperability to work together amongst our tokenized assets, And Luke this morning was absolutely correct. Interoperability is really hard. We're working on it. We've, tried to spearhead a consortium to come up with interoperability standards, and it's going to be a slow and long road, just like W3C and all these other kinds of standards. But interoperability means that we're in a really fortunate place, because what it means is that, and those of you in Web3 will understand this, there's really not a sense of competitive tension, because everybody that we work with or don't yet work with is a potential partner. And this is something that's quite different from the world we came from, because...
Where everybody's a competitor.
Yeah. In traditional gaming, it's all about a user acquisition funnel. You make the funnel as big as possible, you put everybody into the user acquisition funnel, a certain percentage convert to paying users, and you hang on to them for dear life as long as you can, and if you're lucky, they stay around for 15 days. Right? And then you go and you fill the funnel again, and you keep spending money with Google, Apple, and Facebook in order to fill your funnel. Right? So the money goes to them. And that's the biggest tragedy of our industry. And when I say our, I have a bias towards mobile, because that's my background, but mobile games, and Mike knows these statistics very well, we're a $200 billion industry, and how much of that goes to UA? So this year, app install ads, 122 billion. Or no, sorry, 112 billion.
Yep.
112 billion.
So it's Google, Facebook,
Yep.
Unity, etc., making all the money in mobile.
But all those ads, which is mostly Facebook, Apple, and Google for the most part, all the money we spend on ads doesn't go back into the game industry. They take it and do other stuff with it, you know. Zuckerberg builds more Oculus headsets or something, right? It doesn't necessarily come into our industry. And that's the tragedy of it, because we generate all that value, but it doesn't get reinvested into making the game industry better. And in Web3, we kind of growth hack user acquisition, because ownership is a user acquisition vector. Right? We don't need to go and acquire users. They come and they buy stuff, and then they tell their friends about it. They trade stuff. They share stuff. They build community. Right? So the idea of user acquisition is very different. And because it's not an attention economy, we don't need to rely just on advertising. So we don't need ridiculously huge numbers of people either. Right? Now we're going to be able to build great products that bring in revenues at scale with hundreds of thousands, dare I say, single-digit millions of users in a product. Because if you have a product that has a 100% paying rate instead of 2%, and people are spending $10, $20, $50, $500, $1,000 a month instead of 6 cents or 8 cents, it's a different kind of a business model.
So, on that topic, and we discussed, how Animoca has invested in, I'm thinking almost every single top, game that's been the game, blockchain, crypto, Web3 at the intersection, of gaming and community, et cetera. I think a couple of our speakers today, Animoca has invested in. Can you give us one or two examples of which companies you're excited about in the Animoca portfolio and could fit the profile of being potentially one of the games that has millions of users
Sure.
in the community?
No
investment advice, but
So the obvious example is the Sandbox, right? So the Sandbox is a UGC platform modeled after a
user-generated
Minecraft,
content.
exactly,
By the way, everybody.
Minecraft or Roblox style environment. It's we have voxel style art, a voxelated art style. So essentially, it's very easy for creators to create. It wasn't just to have a unique style. It's because it's built out of blocks. It means anybody can do it. It needs to be accessible, because if you do something beautifully photorealistic, unfortunately, none of us know how to use Photoshop and all of these rendering tools. So you need to keep it simple. But I think what Sandbox has, aside from a spectacular team, is people forget that we started building it in 2017. It's a 5-year-old product. It takes time to
and distributed, right? I mean, the team is somewhat distributed a little bit, or are they all based in Paris?
No.
They're all
very
in Paris?
distributed.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
No, we have 200 people between
Paris and Argentina, right?
Argentina and Uruguay.
Uruguay.
And then on top of that, we have a lot around the rest of the world too.
I don't know why I'm thinking Paris.
Actually,
Maybe because of the founders.
Sandbox is almost 400 people now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Snoop Dogg has Snoop Land, and
Yep.
Paris Hilton has Paris Hilton Land, and
Yep.
like everybody.
Although Snoop's done much better than Paris. But yes, so I would say Sandbox, But again, it's because it ticks all the boxes for, I think, an ideal Web3 project, because what Web3 and tokenization does very well is empower creators. So Sandbox is a perfect example of why ownership matters in that context. Other game genre types are more complicated. There are certain things like casual mobile games. You know, it took us a while to find a model that would work for like a match 3 puzzle game. It doesn't, you know, you're kind of, does it need blockchain? Don't know. So we need
or at least maybe not on the front end, and on the back end, who knows?
Correct.
Like, okay, so I think we're going to open up for questions to the audience.
Please.
But I have my question I like to ask everybody on these sort of fireside chats. Luck or hard work in getting to where you are today?
Oh, a ton of luck. Oh my God. Seriously, it's all luck. Like, you keep working hard, and then eventually you get lucky, and the trick is just noticing it when it comes along, honestly.
Fantastic, fantastic. So let's open up for some questions. We want to do like at least 10 or 15 minutes of questions. I know we'll at least have a ton from Andrea, right? I mean, like, so in his Yankees hat. So I don't know, who would like to do the first question? And I'm going to give up my mic so that we can get these questions going. Oh, we'll do Frank first.
Thank you. I've got many questions, but I'm just going to try to condense them in a very confused one. There's a couple of things that comes in mind, right? You're building this thing, and it makes me think almost as like a gaming nation. It's like it looks more like a country. You know, you're printing your own money. People have like some kind of a legal system. I guess identity is coming next. And you kind of started to talk about this idea that there's not really any competition in that space, because you know, you need to collaborate, I guess, the same way a country do. So I'm just wondering, like, can you give examples, or is that something you're thinking about as, like, how do you work with other ecosystems that are not Animoca? Like, do you allow people to move from one to another? Is like stuff that you guys are working on? I'm just curious about how you kind of foreseeing like people going from one ecosystem to another.
Sorry, you mean within games, or actually like our staff working with other companies?
No, within the game, as like the user base, or the
yeah, absolutely.
Like,
So
I've got an NFT that I'm going to get from one game that I can go to another game that I get,
yes,
but then I go outside like
100%. So I can give you kind of different flavors of progress. So the most simple thing, of course, is fungible tokens. So that we started already a few years ago. So lots of exchange of fungible tokens. For the more kind of Web3 native games where we have staking events and things like that, we do collaboration together, you know, liquidity pools and that kind of stuff for people who want to essentially yield farm. That's GameFi, right?
Does it have to be on the same L1?
No, not at all. And because also you can bridge, so we have tokens that are like EVM compatible, but we bring them over to Binance and we do an event on Binance. And because the thing about chains that I think a lot of people don't think about are, they look at blockchains as being technology, but it's actually not. It's actually a community. So think of a blockchain like a bar or a pub. There's certain people who hang out on Tezos, and those are different than the people who hang out on Solana, right? Sure. They have their own tastes. It's a different community. And so what you have to think about when you create content is, you know, which community is a great place for my content to start. You know, that's why if you look at Star Atlas, for example, you know, famously sold lots of content for huge sums of money over the course of 2020 and 2021 for a game that had not yet launched, but, you know, sold a phenomenal amount, unprecedented amount of content. But the reason is because they were the first tentpole franchise on Solana, and the community had pent-up demand for content. And so they timed the market just correctly to connect with that community, to be able to attract good long-term fans. So I think, you know, in the second phase of interoperability, after fungible tokens, are PFP projects. And that's where the state of where we are, I think, in the industry right now. So for example, in the current season of the Sandbox, you can see if you have like a Cool Cat or a Bored Ape or a Meebit or a Punk, then you can bring them into the Sandbox and they will be represented as a 3D avatar. And you don't have to do anything. You just bring your, you know, you just connect your wallet and automatically your Punk will show up.
You guys have done incredibly well during the crypto winter. I mean, you've not just survived but thrived. I mean, you've just raised recently. You know, what's your guidance for, you know, I mean, obviously you've got great fundamentals, but what's your guidance for surviving and thriving in today's world?
So I think one thing Yat's fond of saying is that if this is a crypto winter, then 2018 was the ice age. Because this isn't a winter. Not if you've been in the business since then, at least, or before. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Bitcoin was like $2,000 or something, right? 3,000, yeah. It was under $100. It was $100. And anyway, I think that, like, for our portfolio companies, we went through an exercise starting in around late April, early May, where we just talked to everyone in the portfolio and we're like, look, if you were thinking to go out and raise capital now, stop. Rethink. Just have a think and decide, do you need it? Second question, do you have enough runway to last 18 months? Okay, if you don't, okay, let's talk about your financing strategy. If you do, forget about financing, just go build. And then we'll talk about it a little bit later. Just because you can get it done, but there's going to be pricing pressure. So the thing that I find interesting is there's still a ton of capital out there, as I think everybody has seen, because the big difference between now and 3-4 years ago is that 3 or 4 years ago, there was a question as to the future of blockchain, whether it was going to remain, you know, a kind of a niche fintech product, or whether it was going to be something more. And I think now it's indisputably something more. So the capital that got, you know, maybe people took profits over the last 6-9 months, but all that capital is just still, the important thing is if you look at the on-chain data, it's all still sitting in crypto. It didn't go to fiat. It's sitting in USDC, right? Waiting to come back into the market. So everybody just wants to know, when's the bottom? Because especially with people who are fund managers, no offense to anybody in the room, fund managers just don't want to be the guy who bought 10% above the bottom. They want to wait until it started to pick up so that they're not the mug, right? It's a pride thing. So people are just waiting for when they feel like the bottom is.
Okay, next question. Question up front. So we do a question up front. Oh, actually, we do in the back. First.
Hi. With all the changes that's taking place in the tech field, in the tech world, the goalpost is always moving. How do you get the people factor or your people to stay engaged and involved in what you're trying to do?
We just had an offsite actually about this yesterday. I was the only one who didn't join in person because it was in Hong Kong and the border only opened 5 days ago, so it's complicated. But the way we keep them engaged is because we actually have a very, very strong mission internally. And I think that that's something that we get as a result of Web3. I think anybody who's been in the space for a while understands that philosophically there is a bit of an ethos to Web3 about openness, sharing, cooperation, and positive change. This is something for those of you who are old enough to remember Web 1 had also. So many of us who came from the Web 1 era have brought those philosophies to this period and thought, ooh, now we can finally hopefully deliver some of the stuff that as kids we tried to do back in the 90s. Because the idea of more shared ownership, more access to resources, fairer economies and compensation for creators, all that kind of stuff is exciting. Internally, the motto of our company actually is that we think we're going to fix capitalism. So we like to be ambitious. Well, because let's stray onto the tangent. Because the biggest problem in the world today is income inequality. Right? That's the reason that that democracies are not working, right? Because of income inequality. And the problem with income inequality is that people at the bottom don't get a fair shake. And how are we going to improve that? Well, there are 1 billion people who don't have credit cards and bank accounts that are completely unbanked. But we already have an example of how that can change. Axie Infinity. It's right there. right? All of those billion people can have a blockchain wallet and enter the global financial system. I mean, when we think about things like esports, esports is a business that's created on the idea of advertising, right? And the problem is that if you don't live in a geography that's an attractive advertising demographic, you're not part of that industry. But in our games, you just have to win, and you can make a living, because that's esports. There's a prize to win if you know, and you can take your payment from your blockchain wallet. So you don't actually have any barrier to entry. And so I think that once we think about being able to help people to monetize their own digital assets, you know, we all theoretically own digital stuff. We spend all our day creating digital content every day, but we don't actually get anything in return for it, because we've ceded that ownership to largely centralized platforms who benefit from the knowledge created from all our data.
Next question. That was very good. We'll do Nicholas first.
Hi, thank you. What do you think is going to drive sort of the next cycle? Because it seems that the previous cycle was still sort of driven by technology, infrastructure, so L1s sort of pushing the market forward. Are we at the application layer now? Is this the time that sort of we need to make products which are going to be accessed and used by millions or billions of people, or is there still sort of work on the infrastructure to be done?
So I think I would actually say that what drove within our small industry, the major point of inflection was DeFi. Because DeFi got a lot of people excited about the consumer potential of blockchain, I think, from a financial perspective. And then following on, once NBA Top Shot dropped and people started to see the potential of using playable NFTs, then the game industry got started. So I think that's the thread from which we're going to pull all of content into blockchain. So gaming is the biggest piece. So in terms of mass user adoption of consumer technology, entertainment tends to be why people adopt new technology. You know, it's why we have a smartphone. Nobody makes phone calls on a smartphone, right? So, but every kid wants a smartphone so they can play games. That's why you get a smartphone. It's the biggest game platform. So in terms of adopting this new blockchain technology, I think it's going to come from consumer entertainment products. And gaming is the biggest piece of consumer entertainment because it's bigger than all the other segments combined. But so gaming will lead the way, but it will be followed by music, feature film, you know, linear TV. All of these things will find ways in which to adopt blockchain and, most importantly, enable the creators of those pieces of content. Right? There's no reason that everything we create all day long for YouTube and Twitch and all these other platforms should not be tokenized and allow creators to be able to more benefit from the content they create and their micro audiences. Because don't forget, when the creator gets 98% of what comes their way, maybe you can make a living as a creator with an audience of 20 people.
Hey, Jay. And we'll do like 3 more questions.
Awesome.
There's also going to be a dinner, and we can have a lot of
Yeah.
good food. Come on.
So, given that you are, let's say, easily top 2 investor in this space, and Gabriel may know who I'm talking about here. Number 1, number 2.
Most active, but not the biggest dollar amount.
Okay, well, let's just say it's you or Andreessen. But there are a lot of people, in particular, that will only talk Bitcoin and think Bitcoin is the savior of the world, and any other coin out there is just a waste of time.
Yep.
There are pretty prominent tech leaders like Jack Dorsey who seems to have adopted this position. You know, what's your feeling, your personal feeling on that? But then Animoca, you know, being
Sure.
in the space, how do you deal with that?
I think Bitcoin showed us the potential, and I think Bitcoin will persist. And I think Bitcoin's purpose is to own Bitcoin, and that's it. Because that's not interesting to me. That's like comparing the telephone to the internet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And the caveat to that is you can't program Bitcoin. That's why it's not interesting.
Okay, sorry. Currently, like we know that gamers, like there is a big divide between gamers. Like you have all the ones that are like looking with like curiosity at blockchain, and the other half which is like crazy about it and wants everything to be shut down. So what I want to ask is, what do you think will be the way to bridge the current audience of like investors in the blockchain space playing the games to earn, and like the majority of gamers, so coming from the early adopters to the late majority?
Sure.
And so to add on this question, do you think like the play to earn paradigm is the solution to this problem?
Okay, two parts. So first, the game industry is a very old-fashioned conservative industry, right? And it's very, like you had the diversity and inclusion panel before, right? We should have talked about the game industry, which is like a bunch of stodgy men, right? Well, because it's stupid. Because if you game developers, game designers, most game companies, largely male, except the game industry by revenues, 52% female, player audience size, 52% female. I mean, women are the majority of the game industry, but yet they don't make the games, right? Which is a travesty. But like many other industries, the game industry hates change, right? It's one of those industries similar to Hollywood where the product looks really cool, but it's a really conservative, old-fashioned industry. And so we saw when... Yeah, totally.
Both sides.
The players are, yes, they're terrible. Do you remember when mobile came along and they said, oh my God, who is going to play a game on this size screen? That's stupid. Nobody will ever do it, right? And if it wasn't for mobile, the game industry could be dead by now, right? Mobile is what saved the game industry. And so every new generation of change in gaming has resistance from the traditional game business. So I think this is just an education process. But I think speaking specifically to play to earn, I think it's the idea of digital ownership that is going to be adopted by primarily a younger generation, to be honest, because it's going to seem natural to them at some point. Because I think there's going to be a certain point at which they say, oh my God, you used to spend money in games and you didn't actually own anything? Like you just gave them the money? That's ridiculous. Why would you do that, right? It wouldn't make any sense to them. It's like, oh, you paid to watch this movie, but you don't own it. You can't watch it again. Why would that happen? So I think the idea that we have to think about is not earning. The idea is ownership. That's the important part. And if I think of ownership, I go back to like, I first started playing games when they were invented, right, on console, like Atari 2600, cartridges. But when you own physical media, what do you do with it when you're done? You sell it secondhand at a shop. That's how GameStop was born. You recycle your old stuff and you sell it at a loss, right? You sell it for 10 cents on the dollar because it's old, just like all our recycled stuff. Why shouldn't you be able to do that with your digital content? Like the sword I buy that's an NFT in a game shouldn't be a speculative instrument, but if I buy it for $1, I should be able to sell it for 10 cents to somebody else who wants to try out the game. That makes sense.
I don't know, Mike, but and you still have ownership of the game company of creating it or to create it.
Yes.
It's not necessarily like
Correct.
It's just the old school methodology where we need to own the whole thing. And what happens if they take it out of our ecosystem? Then we lose revenue we can't control, we can't see it, so that means we're never going to earn anything from it.
And it's because we had no digital rights management that has ever worked before. And so the problem is the mentality of assuming that something that is digital must be infinitely copyable and so therefore has no value. But now we've changed that. So all we have to do is shift people's paradigms to starting to understand that, well, actually, it does have value because I can possess this NFT and only I can possess this one.
Hi. First of all, congrats. Big fan. Thanks for the send. Yeah, I'm a fan. Tricky question. Like, I'm one of those one that believe that crypto is suffering quite a bit. I don't know if you want to share the view. It's suffering quite a bit for the speculation on the tokens. If you bring it back into the play to earn, you mentioned, for example, Axie Infinity, great example, play to earn. You had kids in Asia that were, I don't know, earning more money than their parents. Then suddenly the market goes down, value disappear because you got people selling the token, the price goes down, and automatically the play to earn environment basically loses is Mojo. No, it's not anymore producing wealth. How do you think we have to act in the industry to focus more on the utility, right? Because generally when you design a token, you have an utility of the participants to play in the ecosystem. Why, if you just go on an exchange and it's about making speculation like in the financial market, we'll never get there.
So I think what you have to do is I'd focus on two different concepts. So first on tokenomics, the one most important thing in our philosophy of designing tokens, and we design a lot of tokens, is you design a token to build community. And that's the goal and the purpose of the token. The problem, I think, was that over the last several years, a lot of people understood that you could design a token for the purpose of the creators of the token making money and being able to sell the token quickly, and that became a business model. And in a hot market, those things happen. And it's unfortunate because then, we get a mischaracterization perhaps of the whole industry because, there's money to be made, and when there's easy money to be made, you have bad actors. So I think we always focus on how do we design a token to create a perpetual community. That's the most important thing. And it's not easy, right? We have a very big tokenomics team now, and these people are hard to find. I mean, one of them is an actual rocket scientist. And we have about a dozen people just focused on tokenomics. Yeah. I mean, and that's not in any, including the studios. But yes. Because also they need to continually refine their practice because new stuff, like new ideas come out every week. So we need to stay on the edge of everything. I think the other thing to think about is that that player constituency of speculators is still a valid constituency. They're not people who we want to deny entry into our products because they have a role to play. And so I think this is one part that it's sometimes challenging for people who either come from the I'm going to use games as the example, from the game industry or from the crypto industry to figure out how to marry both of those worlds. Because I talk to a lot of game developers, for example, and they're like, oh, we're going to create a great Web3 blockchain game. We're going to have a marketplace. You can trade your stuff. You can own your NFTs. It's going to be great. And then you just say, okay, so who's going to be the market maker? How are they going to sell their stuff? Where are you going to get liquidity from? And then they look at you and they're like, liquidity? Right? Because they don't understand how a marketplace works. That's not traditionally part of making games. But if you have speculators, if you offer staking and yields, then you can go to somebody who's a Web3 native and be like, oh, if you stake for 28% APY, put up 2 ETH. No traditional gamer is going to put up 2 ETH. But anybody from crypto will take that all day long. So you can put those two constituencies together in order to create a virtuous ecosystem because you have the Web3 speculators who are coming in to create the liquidity basically for your player base to sell into. So you have to figure out how to design your token ecosystem so that there's symbiosis between them.
Okay, 2 more questions.
Thank you. Wait. Okay. I don't know if this works, but I think you can.
Yeah.
I think you can hear me.
It's okay, I can hear you.
It's fine. I wanted to ask. So usually in the traditional investment world, you tend to see investors that don't invest. If you have investor X doesn't invest with investor Y, and they tend to be, very defensive of their space. And Animoca has literally invested in everything that you can possibly imagine. How do you actually differentiate some of your businesses in the places where you actually invested? They're even competing with themselves. Like, how do you actually differentiate your portfolio companies, and who do you give attention to, and what type of support do you give them to? Because sometimes they're competing exactly for the same eyeballs, and they have exactly the same features, I would say. And so, like,
okay, so I guess here's a good example. And these are 2 deals I did. I invested in 2 companies that both make virtual pets. One makes cats, one makes dogs, right? Because everybody wants to own a pet, right? And the first thing I said to them is, work together. Because both of you have different types of skills, right? One team came from a very traditional, like AAA game background. The other team was a crypto team, but they came to the same idea at the same point in time and thought about building product in slightly different ways. One's a little bit more Web3, one's a little bit more traditional, has AR, has other things involved. But fundamentally, it's an NFT pet. I think that we invest very diversely because we want to support the ecosystem. This is something that we've done since we entered the blockchain space in 2017. Originally, the philosophy was that we wanted there to be an industry to be a part of. And if we didn't support it, you know, at that time, companies like OpenSea and Dapper and, you know, and Sky Mavis, who does Axie, they were all just startup companies. And we were more mature than them, and we had some access to capital, so we tried to leverage that to support them. Because if they didn't survive, you know, if OpenSea didn't survive, where do we sell our stuff, right? So we want to support the industry. That has now continued because we see the benefits of the network effects of all of these companies working together. To answer your question specifically about how we spend our time, we try to grow our parent organization so that we can spend as much time with everyone as we possibly can, because everybody is valuable, right? There's something we can do to help everybody, yes, but more importantly, we also learn from them. That's a really important, like, the more we can share across our ecosystem of companies and be like, oh, you should talk to those guys over there because actually I think they've solved the problem that you're telling me about. I'm not sure, but I was in a meeting, and talk to them. And if we can help facilitate those kind of connections, hopefully we can be more useful to everybody. Because the thing about Web3 is that because of interoperability, one person's success is everybody's success, right? If you can onboard 1 million users that I couldn't, that's great, because actually those 1 million users will be more likely to come and, you know, use some of our products at some point in time. And I'll come to you and be like, oh, how can we put your game NFTs into our game, and blah, blah, blah. So that interoperability actually solves everything.
One, two. Yeah. You guys were like super early on NFTs. I'm just curious about what's your next challenge, like technology-wise? Is it you guys look into things like, I don't know, soul bond tokens make sense for what you're building, or figured out like what's a good DAO governance? Like what's kind of the age of what you guys are experimenting with?
There are so many hard problems to solve.
Your favorite one?
So DAO governance is definitely one, and I think actually we get a lot of learnings there because my colleague Yat is on the ApeCoin Council, and actually the ApeCoin DAO does a lot of work. They put out new proposals every 2 weeks or every week, I think. So actually that's been a really good learning experience for us as an organization via Yat to understand about governance. And it's interesting because when you have the ability to do that in an on-chain way, you can actually implement a quasi-democratic system very easily and quickly. Note to all those governments out there trying to figure out voting. But I think, so DAO governance is one of them. I think interoperability, so we've come together with a bunch of other companies to form the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3. And the idea is essentially to create a working group consortium where we can all try to just figure out the best way to create interoperability amongst each other. It really just started with a dozen companies, and we all just said, okay, so like, how do we take stuff from Decentraland and bring it into Sandbox? And how do we take stuff from CryptoVoxels and put it into Decentraland and to Upland? And we realized that we all have different graphic formats. We all have different, you know, everything is different. So we've got to solve this problem, but we don't want, like, the best example was in the first meeting we had, we were on a Zoom with like 15 of us, and somebody said, so has anybody ever created a standard before? And we're all like, And one guy on the call said, well, you know, this is tech. Usually you acquire dominant market share and then you ram your standard down everybody else's throat. This is how it works in the tech industry. And so we set out to create a consortium that was going to be the opposite of that, because what we wanted was community-driven standards. We wanted something that would be, from the ground up, because that's Web3. The last thing we want is for, honestly, Microsoft and Facebook to tell us what these standards should be, because that's not Web3.
Wonderful. Robby, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence here, flying in from London. No, it was really, really meaningful. We have a gift bag for you here.
Thank you.
I have to say, Animoca has changed my life in strange ways. It was unexpected, but it's such a blessing to be, a friend of the family, and you, and we're so happy that you're able to come to Tectalia, and we hope we can make this a thing. So maybe next year we do Venice or something else, but thank you so much.
We can do that too.
We could do that, or in the Sandbox. We could do something there as well.
In the Sandbox.
But I want everybody to really put their hands together for Robby. Thank you so much.